Hello, my name is Esau Guardado, and to my left we have
Ariana Smith,
Joshlynn Williams,
Marc Castro.
Audrey Williams.
and today as a group we're going to be talking about the Lattice model.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ariana Smith. During the next few minutes, we will talk you about the Lattice model. First, we will be giving a brief background of the model and the impact it has on the financial statements. Second, we will present you an overview of what the Lattice model is, followed by a detailed explanation of how the model is constructed and the logic behind it. Next, we will talk you about the advantage and disadvantage of the Lattice model over the Black-Scholes model. Finally, we will give a brief summary and a recommendation. Now, Esau will talk you about the background and the financial statement impact.
My name is Esau Guardado, and I'm going to be giving you a bit background on how we came to use the Lattice model and how it impacts the financial statements. Historically, most companies have measured compensation expense of employee stock options at their intrinsic value, which is the difference between the market price and the option price that can be acquired. However, most companies set their option price equal to the market price, so it will not give rise to an expense and notably not hit net income. But after the 2002 high-profile company scandals, people argued that not expensing the value of options led to the collapse of Enron and other such companies. So this led to a revision of GAAP. Now GAAP requires fair value accounting for all employee stock options at grant date, which can be calculated by an option pricing model such as the Lattice model. The change to fair value would impact the company's financial statements by having compensation expense and a reduction to net income each service year, which can be a significant amount for companies that use stock options as a main source of compensation. Now Audrey will explain the logic and assembly of the Lattice model.
Hi, my name is Audrey Williams, and I will be speaking to you about the logic of the Lattice model and how it is assembled. The Lattice model examines the potential price of a stock option over its contractual life, assuming only two possible outcomes. Either the stock price increases or it decreases. This is referred to as the binomial distribution. The model then calculates the present value of the intrinsic value of the stock option using probability factors for the purpose of arriving at a compensatory expense valuation. The model requires several inputs, such as the current stock price, the exercise price, the suboptimal exercise factor, the risk-free interest rate, the contractual life, the volatility rate, and the dividend yield. Now let's take a look at how the model is assembled using Microsoft Excel. First, we create an input sheet where the user must define values for the input requirements. For illustration purposes, we have input several hypothetical figures. At the bottom of the sheet, you will see the calculated fair value of the stock option, which is the output of the model. On a separate tab, we have laid out the Lattice stock price tree and the input formulas necessary for calculating the fair value stock price given the inputs. Columns A through B contain the input values defined on the first tab. The values have simply been carried over to this tab in order to make the formula calculations easier to implement. Ignoring columns J through M for the time being, let's first look at the Lattice stock price tree assembly, columns D through H. This particular model examines the possible future stock prices over a period of 4 years. For stock with a current price of $18.50 and assumes the price will either increase or decrease. During year 1, if the stock increases, the price is $31.70. But if it decreases, the price is $6.72. Each possible outcome or branch of the Lattice tree is referred to as a node. So for year 1, we have a node here and a node here. The decimal digits that you see directly underneath each node represent the probability of that particular stock price occurring. In year 1, since the stock price can go either up or down, the probability of each node is 50% or 0.5. In year 2, however, the probability of each node is 25% or 0.25, because as you can see, there are now 4 possible outcomes. 1, 2, 3, 4. For example, if in year 1,
the stock increased, and in year 2 it decreased, the stock price would be $11.52. On the other hand, if in year 1 the stock decreased, and in year 2 it also decreased, the stock price would be $2.44. Since each year represented in the model has 2 outcomes, the number of nodes on the tree doubles each year. You can see that in year 2 there are 4 nodes, in year 3 there are 8 nodes, and in year 4 there are 16 nodes. The calculations here are relatively straightforward. You simply take the prior year stock price estimate and multiply it by 1 plus the interest rate minus the dividend yield, and then multiply that value by 1 plus or minus the volatility rate. Now let's take a look at the intrinsic value calculations. Here we have created an individual row that corresponds to each possible node in the stock price tree. The first formula required is to calculate the probability that the stock will be exercised. To do this, the formula first checks to see if the current year matches the contractual life, and if it does, the option is assumed to be exercised in that year because the contractual life has expired. The probability factor returned equals that of the node that's represented on the stock price tree. If the contractual life of the stock has not expired, the formula then checks whether the stock price of a node equals or exceeds the value of the exercise price times the exercise option factor. If it does, the stock is assumed to be exercised, provided it has not been previously exercised. Again, the probability factor returned equals that of the one represented in the stock price tree for that particular node. Next, the intrinsic value is calculated by subtracting the exercise price of the stock from the stock price shown on a node of the stock price tree. If the exercise price is greater than the stock price of the node, the intrinsic value is 0, because one would not elect to exercise their options if this is the case. Lastly, the present value of each intrinsic value is calculated using the discounted rate or interest rate assumed and the probability factor. All of the present values are then summed to calculate the fair value of a single stock option. For clarification, let's quickly look at an example following it all the way through the stock price tree. In this scenario, the early exercise price of the stock option is $27.75, derived from multiplying the early exercise factor with the exercise price of the stock option. In looking at each node of the tree, we can see that with these given inputs, the early exercise price of the stock is achieved here with one upward movement of the stock during year 1. $31.70 exceeds the exercise price of $27.75. Therefore, the stock is assumed to be exercised, and the probability of this stock is 50% as shown here. The present value of the intrinsic value is $6.35. Conversely, if we examine the downward movement of the stock, we see that the exercise price is only exceeded in year 4, right here where the stock price is $33.93. However, since the stock price only has a contractual life of 3 years, the stock would have been assumed exercised in year 3, and the probability would correspond to the nodes on the tree here. Therefore, the probability in year 4, when the exercise price is here, would be 0.
Hello, my name is Joshlynn Williams, and today I will be talking to you about the advantages of using the Lattice model. The Lattice model is a versatile model. It has a tree-like structure that allows future estimates and option prices to be made. Changes in volatility and dividends yield can be captured over the expected life of the options. Unlike the Black-Scholes model, it does not have a weighted average estimate to make assumptions about the option characteristics. The Lattice model also allows for companies to assimilate different requirements concerning market options. For instance, if an option is not made exercisable until share prices reaches a certain level, companies can change the suboptimal exercise factor using the Lattice model. The Black-Scholes model does not have an input for suboptimal exercise factor. It also doesn't have an input for contractual life. However, the Lattice model does have an input for contractual life to allow for further accuracy when estimating option prices. Because of the tree-like structure and added inputs, such as contractual life, suboptimal exercise factor, and the changes in volatility and dividend yields for future years, companies can estimate further options more accurately. Now, Marc will be talking to you about the disadvantages of using the Lattice model.
My name is Marc Castro, and I'll be talking to you today about the disadvantages of using the Lattice model. First of all, the Lattice model requires considerable technical expertise in worksheet programs such as Microsoft Excel. The Lattice model's versatility also makes it very complex, more complex than the Black-Scholes model. This is because of the many possible inputs. This makes the model impractical for companies that lack a variety of stock options. This is due to the difference in option expense, which becomes negligible, especially in the eyes of investors. Lastly, the Lattice model requires in-house programming or third-party software. This software can be very costly. For example, Procogniz, a company that specializes in producing stock option value programs, starts at $1,000 and can cost up to $2,000. Now Ariana will close with a summary and a recommendation.
To summarize, GAAP requires implied stock options to be recorded at fair value. This can be calculated using the Lattice model. The financial statements are impacted by a reduction to net income. The Lattice model calculates the present value of the stock's intrinsic value by examining the potential price of the stock over the contractual life, assuming a binomial distribution. Its main disadvantage is that it may require technical expertise. However, it is more versatile and accurate than the Black-Scholes model. In conclusion, we highly recommend the Lattice model over the Black-Scholes model because it provides companies with the most accurate compensation expense.